I didn't expect a spotlight. Just a chair somewhere inside the room where my sister was getting married. But apparently even that was too much to ask. The wedding venue was a luxury lakeside resort in Lake Tahoe, California, wrapped in autumn leaves and glistening reflections. Inside the main hall, tall glass ceilings soared above tables draped in ivory linens, and soft string music floated above the hum of excited guests. The kind of celebration you see in bridal magazines, curated to perfection. I arrived in a burgundy dress, the only one I owned, fancy enough to wear to a place like this. Not too bold, not too plain, just enough to blend in without being invisible, or so I thought. As I stepped through the carved wooden doors of the lobby, a young woman in a black suit greeted me with a bright professional smile. She had a clipboard tucked under one arm and a Bluetooth earpiece flashing in one ear. "Good afternoon, guest name." "Grace Whitmore," I said. Her fingers danced across the tablet. Then a slight pause. Just long enough to register, her expression didn't change. But her tone tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, you're seated in the hallway section just near the code area, if you'll follow me." I blinked. "Excuse me." She had already turned right this way. We passed the ornate double doors leading into the main banquet hall. Through the glass, I saw tables glowing under chandeliers. My parents were seated near the front, chatting with old friends. My sister Lila stood near the floral arch, posing for pre-ceremony photos, her white lace gown shimmering with each flash. The woman led me to a small table tucked near a wall outside the banquet room. A side corridor, really. Two other guests I didn't recognize were already seated there. An elderly uncle, perhaps, and a distant cousin. "Here you are, table H," she said, placing a folded name card before me. "Mary Evans hallway area." It might as well have said, "Not really invited." I stood there, heart pounding, suddenly aware of the cheapness of my heels against the marbled floor. The scent of the coat rack nearby was a mix of perfume and cold neglect. I picked up the card slowly and forced a smile. "Thank you," I whispered, but inside something stung. I made my way toward the main hall, seeking answers. A soft laugh from my sister's voice floated through the door. I found my mother standing beside her, adjusting the veil, her face glowing with pride. "Mom?" I asked gently. She turned distracted. "Grace, you're here." "They've seated me in the hallway, next to the coat check. I thought maybe it was a mistake." Her smile barely faltered. "Sweetheart, there were just too many guests. We had to prioritize those closest to Lila. You understand, right? I am her sister." "Yes, but you know you've always done your own thing. We figured you'd prefer a quieter spot." I stared at her. A quieter spot, like an afterthought. Lila stepped in, radiant and poised. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with that familiar mix of performance and precision. "I was just asking about the seating." She laughed too, light, too rehearsed. "Oh, don't worry. It's just a seat. Don't be sensitive, Grace. Today's not about drama. It's about love. Love." My father appeared then, looking freshly pressed in his tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne. He didn't meet my eyes when he said, "It's just a seat, honey. Let's not make it a thing." And just like that, the conversation ended. They turned away. I stood still for a moment longer. Then I turned back toward the hallway and took my place beside the coat rack. From my seat, I could see everything through the glass. My family laughing, toasting being whole without me. The music rose as the ceremony began and the doors closed gently, like the final punctuation on a chapter I'd never been allowed to finish. I gripped the name card until the edges bent. They didn't forget me. They just never thought I needed remembering. And sitting there in silence, I remembered something else. 3 years ago, I'd gone home for Thanksgiving. Lila had been off traveling through Italy with her then-boyfriend. And for once, the house was quiet. It was just me and my parents. That weekend, Mom asked me to find an old box of family photos in the attic. I went into her room to look for it and saw a small leather-bound notebook sitting on the vanity. It wasn't hidden, just placed. Curiosity pulled me toward it. When I opened it, I saw my mother's familiar handwriting in tidy loops. The first day Lila went to preschool, she didn't cry. She waved at me bravely and marched right in. I flipped a page. Lila's favorite meal is my baked ziti, she always asks for seconds. Page after page. Memory after memory. All about Lila. Her milestones, her likes and fears, her first heartbreak, her dreams. And not one mention of me. I read through the entire notebook. Not a single line with my name. It was as if I had never existed in the intimate, cherished version of our family my mother held dear. When she entered the room, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "Why is this all about Lila?" She gave a soft laugh. "Lila's always been so delicate, I wanted her to feel remembered. And me." Her eyes didn't waver. "You've always been strong, Grace. You didn't need it." That moment had stayed with me, like a bruise beneath the skin, one no one else could see, but that never fully faded. And now, sitting in this hallway beside strangers watching my own family pretend I wasn't there, the bruise flared back to life. I looked down at the place card again. Grace Whitmore, Table H. It didn't matter how many years I'd held my head high, how many holidays I'd shown up for, how many texts I'd sent just to check in. None of it mattered. I would always be the invisible daughter. But something shifted that day. It wasn't a loud, dramatic crack. It was quiet, internal. A choice made. This time I wouldn't patch it back together. I wouldn't smile and pretend it didn't sting. I wouldn't let them write me out of the store. This was still my name. And this time, I would make sure it meant something. Even if it meant walking alone. We remember the things we choose to write down, and what we don't write says even more. 3 years ago, I came home for Thanksgiving. It was a rare visit, not because I was too busy, but because over the years, coming home had started to feel like showing up to a play where I had no lines. That particular year, Lila was off somewhere in Portugal, with her then boyfriend, some tech startup founder with too many teeth and not enough warmth. Her absence created a quietness in the house I hadn't known in years. No perfume trails down the hallway. No exaggerated laughter echoing from the kitchen. No constant undercurrent of performance. Mom greeted me at the door with her usual half-smile. The kind that said, "You're welcome here, but only if you don't expect too much." She hugged me loosely and then pulled away quickly, like a quick exhale. We talked politely over tea, and at one point she asked if I'd help her with something. "I'm putting together a memory album," she said, "for the family." A part of me perked up at the thought, maybe she's finally trying. I thought, maybe this was her way of saying, "I do remember you, Grace." She handed me a thin cardboard box yellowed around the edges and told me to check the old drawers in my childhood room for more photos. I nodded and climbed the stairs slowly, fingers trailing the handrail like I used to when I was small. My room was still there, mostly untouched, same twin bed under the window, same bookshelf sagging from old paperbacks, same corkboard pinned with ribbons from high school, spelling bee. Pulled open the bottom drawer of my nightstand and found a few faded photos. Some of me alone at science fairs, others from awkward middle school birthday parties. Most were unremarkable. I stacked them neatly and was about to close the drawer when something caught my eye across the room. A glint of soft brown leather peeking out from the half-open drawer of Mom's vanity. I don't know what made me walk toward it, only that my fingers moved before my thoughts did. I reached in and pulled out the leather notebook. It was worn but well kept, the kind of thing someone touches often. There was a ribbon bookmark tucked inside, and when I opened it, the familiar loops of my mother's handwriting filled the page. The first sentence stopped me cold. Lila didn't cry on her first day of kindergarten. She waved goodbye and ran inside, brave as ever. I turned the page. More notes, more Lila. Lila used to love the baked ziti I made on Thursdays. Lila was afraid of thunder, but she always came to my bed with her pink blanket, seat after page, sweet, tender, rich with detail, and all about Lila. Her milestones, her fears, her joys. There wasn't a single mention of me. I flipped through more pages faster now. desperate, panicked even. There has to be something, anything. A birthday, a report card, a hospital visit, a scraped knee, but there was nothing. No mention of Grace, not one. Not even my name. I sat down hard on the edge of Mom's bed. The notebook trembled in my hands, not because it was heavy, but because it wasn't meant for me. It was a record of love, carefully curated, intentionally preserved. And I wasn't in it. The ache that bloomed in my chest wasn't new, but it had never been this sharp. For years I had told myself I was imagining things, that I had simply grown up quieter, more reserved, that maybe I was easier to overlook, not less love. But this was proof, not passive forgetting, intentional exclusion. A floorboard creaked behind me, and I turned to see Mom standing in the doorway holding a laundry basket, like nothing in the world was out of place. Her eyes flicked down to the notebook in my lap. "Oh, you found Lila's book," she said, stepping inside. I looked at her, still sitting, fingers gripping the cover. "You wrote all this?" She nodded. "Of course I didn't want to forget the little things. Kids grow up so fast." "Just about Lila." There was a pause. Barely a breath's worth. "She's always been sensitive, needed more." Anchoring. I stared in me. She placed the basket on the bed beside me, adjusting the edge of the fitted sheet like it mattered. "You were always so strong, Grace. You didn't need that kind of remembering." A long silence fell between us. I wanted to scream. Strong. Is that what she called being neglected? Invisible? I wanted to ask why she couldn't see that strong children are often just quiet ones. The ones who learn not to ask, not to cry, not to need. Instead, I said nothing, not because I had no words, but because suddenly I saw the entire story of my childhood in full, not as a blur, but as a sharp mosaic, all its pieces falling into place. The missing photos, the unequal praise, the way my achievements had always been folded behind someone else's spotlight. Mom reached over and took the notebook gently from my lap. "Lila's always been the emotional one," she said almost wistfully. "I just wanted her to feel special." I looked at her carefully. "And you didn't think I needed that?" She paused, then sighed. "Grace, you've always been the one we could count on. Never needed reminding, never asked for attention. You just managed." That word, managed. Like my childhood was a logistics problem. "I thought love didn't need to be earned," I said softly. She didn't reply. In that moment, I felt something inside me begin to shift. I had spent so much of my life waiting for recognition, for a seat at the table, for my mother to look at me and see more than just someone who didn't need anything. But maybe she never would. Maybe the absence of my name in those pages wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. I stood slowly, smoothing the bedspread as I rose. My hand brushed the notebook, but I left it there. "I'm going to head out for a walk," I said, voice steady. Mom gave me a short nod, as if we'd just finished talking about grocery lists. As I stepped out of the room, the hallway seemed longer than before. The house quieter, but the quiet no longer hurt. It just confirmed things. Some stories get written down, others don't, and sometimes that silence tells you everything you need to know. That night, I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes before starting the engine. The driveway lights of my childhood home glowed softly behind me, but I didn't look back. I wasn't angry anymore, just done hoping. Done trying to be remembered by people who never really saw me to begin with. I closed the book gently, not because I forgave her, but because I finally saw the story for what it really was. I was never part of it. And now I was ready to write a story of my own, one where I wasn't invisible. I thought I was the only one pretending. Turns out I wasn't the only one watching. The hallway outside the grand ballroom was quiet, save for the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filtering through the ornate doors. I sat alone on a velvet bench. The place card with my name, Grace Whitmore, still clenched in my hand. The scent of lilies from the nearby arrangements was overpowering, almost suffocating. Footsteps approached, hesitant and measured. I looked up to see Ethan Carter, the groom, standing a few feet away. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his eyes betrayed a storm of emotion. "Grace," he began, his voice low. "Mind if I sit?" I gestured to the empty space beside me. "It's your wedding. You can sit wherever you like." He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not exactly. Seems like seating arrangements are more complicated than I thought." I raised an eyebrow. "Tell me about it." He glanced at the ballroom doors, then back at me. "I wanted to ask you something about Lila." I stiffened. "What about her? Has she always been different? Has she changed recently?" I considered his question, memories flooding back Lila's manipulative tendencies, her ability to twist narratives to her advantage, the way she always managed to be the center of attention. "She's always been Lila," I said carefully. "Why do you ask?" He hesitated, then pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages before handing it to me. "I found these last night." I read the messages. My heart sinking. Lila had been communicating with someone about financial strategies, discussing ways to ensure Ethan would be entirely dependent on her within 6 months of marriage. The words were cold, calculated. I handed the phone back, meeting his gaze. "I'm sorry, Ethan." Before he could respond, the doors to the ballroom opened, and Celeste Carter, Ethan's mother, stepped out. Her expression was stern, but her eyes held a hint of sorrow. "Ethan, Grace," she greeted, nodding to each of us. "May I join you?" Ethan stood, offering his seat. "Of course, Mother." She sat gracefully, pulling out a small envelope from her clutch. "I wasn't sure whether to show you this, but I believe you have the right to know." Inside were printed screenshots, more messages from Lila this time, to her stylist discussing plans to manipulate Ethan post-marriage, ensuring she had control over all assets. Ethan's face paled as he read, his hands trembling. "I can't believe this." Celeste placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I had my doubts, but I wanted to believe she loved you." I remained silent, the weight of the revelations pressing down on all of us. The wedding was still going, but now a different ceremony had begun, one where masks were slipping, and the bride might not leave with a husband after all. Ethan stared at the printed messages, his hands trembling slightly. The weight of betrayal pressed heavily on his shoulders. Celeste, his mother, sat beside him, her expression a mix of disappointment and concern. "How long have you known?" Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Celeste sighed. "I had my suspicions, but I wanted to believe she loved you. Seeing these messages confirmed my fears." Grace, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but Lila has always been strategic." Ethan looked up, pain evident in his eyes. "What do I do now the ceremony is about to start?" Celeste placed a comforting hand on his arm. "You have a choice. You can go through with it, pretending everything is fine, or you can confront her. But remember, this is your life. Don't let appearances dictate your decisions." Grace nodded in agreement. "You've seen the truth. It's up to you to decide what to do with it." Ethan took a deep breath, standing up. "I need a moment to think." He walked away, leaving Grace and Celeste in the hallway. Grace turned to Celeste. "Thank you for showing him the messages." Celeste nodded. He deserved to know the truth before making a lifelong commitment based on lies. As the music from the ballroom signaled the impending start of the ceremony, Grace couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The facade was cracking, and the truth was beginning to surface. Ethan turned down a quiet corridor, the soft carpet swallowing the sound of his footsteps. The pastel landscapes hung crooked on the walls, doing nothing to still the chaos in his head. The words from the messages burned into his mind. "Once he's fully dependent, everything will be mine." It wasn't a joke. Not a moment of stressed-out sarcasm from a nervous bride. It was a strategy, a timeline, a cold-blooded plan. He leaned his forehead against the frosted glass window. Outside, the hydrangea garden shimmered in the afternoon light, where in less than an hour, he and Lila were supposed to stand under a white arch and exchange vows. Vows with someone he no longer recognized. Ethan, the voice behind him was soft. Not startled, not urgent, just real. He turned to see Grace standing there, still in her burgundy dress, her expression unreadable but present. She hadn't left. He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Do you think I'm a fool?" Grace shook her head. "No. I think you're someone who wanted to believe in something good. And that's rare." Ethan let out a dry laugh. "I thought I knew her. I thought I was making the right choice." Grace didn't say anything. Some truths didn't need advice, just company. "There's still a part of me," Ethan went on, "that wants to believe she loved me, that what we built wasn't fake." "Then ask yourself this," Grace said gently. "Does love involve manipulation, lying? Secret plans to break someone down and take everything for yourself?" The question hung in the air, heavy and immovable. After a long moment, Ethan nodded. "Thank you, Grace." "I didn't say anything you didn't already know," she replied. "You just needed to hear it out loud." The door at the end of the hallway opened again. Celeste entered, phone still in hand. She didn't speak right away. Her expression said enough, a mixture of grief, disappointment, and a steel-sharp clarity honed over years of seeing beneath masks. "Do you know what you're going to do?" Ethan asked her quietly. Celeste nodded once. "And you don't have to do it alone." Grace stepped back to give them space, but Ethan called out after her, "Grace, if this escalates, I want you there. Not because you're family, but because you're the only one here, not pretending." Grace paused, then nodded. "I'll be there." In the grand reception hall, the soft hum of chatter and string music filled the air. Guests took their seats blissfully unaware. Everything looked perfect. The golden cutlery, the crystal centerpieces, the floral arrangements cascading down from the ceiling like a dream. But in the shadows, in the places where truth had been buried for years, something else was unfolding. A different ceremony was about to begin. Ethan stood in the groom's prep room, staring at his reflection. The tux still fit. The tie was crisp, but the eyes staring back at him belonged to a different man now. A man who had seen behind the curtain and wouldn't pretend anymore. Celeste adjusted his collar like she had when he was a boy brushing a speck of lint from his lapel. "When you walk out there," she said, "don't think you're ruining a special day. You're saving yourself from a lifetime of regret." Ethan nodded slowly. "If someone's going to walk away ashamed today, it won't be me." Across the hall, Grace still sat near the coat rack, her assigned spot. But the humiliation no longer stung. Not because it didn't matter, but because now she saw the full picture. This wasn't about seeding charts or favoritism. This was about power, and who finally had the strength to speak. She looked through the glass doors into the garden. Lila was glowing radiant in her mermaid gown, laughing effortlessly with her bridesmaids and charming the crowd like a pageant queen. But Grace had seen the crack, the messages, the manipulation, the mask slipping, and something told her that mask was about to shatter. Grace stood up, not to retreat, but to witness, because from this moment forward, she wasn't the forgotten daughter, the background character, the afterthought. She was the one who remembered everything, and she wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The wedding was still going. But now a different ceremony had begun, one where masks were slipping and the bride might not leave with a husband after all. They say weddings are about beginnings, but some are just very expensive endings. Upstairs in a quiet conference room at the Lake Tahoe resort, far from the clinking glasses and soft music, Grace sat by the window, her fingers loosely holding the armrest of her chair. The golden light of late afternoon brushed against the mountains. Outside, but inside this room, shadows stretched longer. Tension hovered like a storm waiting to break. Ethan Carter, the groom, stood near the head of the table, unreadable. His jaw tight, beside him stood his mother Celeste. Carter, elegant, formidable, calm as ice, a discreet legal advisor, waited silently in the corner, folders in hand. There were no flowers here, no champagne, no laughter. Just the heavy anticipation of truth. Then the door opened. Lila Whitmore entered first, radiant as ever in her designer wedding dress, but the light in her eyes flickered. Something about her confidence felt over-rehearsed. Now, brittle walking beside her was Caroline, her mother looking confused. Slightly flustered, like she'd only just realized this wasn't going to be a toast and photo op. Ethan didn't move. He simply placed a white envelope on the table. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Lila's eyes darted to the envelope, then back at his face. She gave a breathy laugh. "Are we doing theatrics now, Ethan? It's an annulment petition, and I've already signed it." Silence swallowed the room. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. Celeste stepped forward and slid a thin stack of printed papers toward Lila. Her voice when she spoke was calm but sharp. "Messages, screenshots, emails. We have copies of the texts you sent to your stylist, to your friend Madison. Even the divorce consultation you filed last month. This isn't a misunderstanding, eh? It's a pattern." Lila's smile faltered. "Those were jokes between friends. It's private." Ethan's voice cut in cold. Flat. "You said you'd make me financially dependent within 6 months. That you'd keep acting sweet until everything in this house was yours." Caroline looked stunned, Lila. "You didn't—" "I didn't mean it." Lila snapped, her voice rising. "This is all being blown out of proportion. You people are just jealous. Especially you, Grace." She turned on her sister, venom in her tone. "You just can't stand it, can you? That for once, I was the star. You've been lurking in the shadows your whole life, and now you want to ruin mine." Grace stood slowly, her voice low and steady. "I didn't ruin anything. You did that all by yourself." "Oh, please." Lila barked, her dress rustling as she stepped forward. "You always wanted to be the victim. Now you finally have your big scene." "No." Grace said, her eyes locked on her sister. "You've never understood. I didn't want a spotlight. I wanted respect." Robert, Grace, and Lila's father entered quietly then, as if the air had summoned him. He looked at both daughters, then stopped at Grace. For the first time in years, he truly looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said. Grace blinked. "What? I should have seen it. I was silent too long." "You were right about everything." Lila turned toward their father in disbelief. "You're taking her side?" Robert's voice didn't waver. "I'm not taking sides. I'm finally seeing clearly." Celeste, still standing tall, added, "Love isn't manipulation. Lila, real family doesn't come with conditions and string." Lila looked around the room. No one spoke for her, no one defended her. "You all think I'm some monster," she whispered. "All I wanted was security, love, a life that made sense." Grace looked at her sister, and for the first time didn't see a rival. She saw someone scared unraveling. "You didn't lose Ethan because of me," Grace said softly. "You lost him because you never learned what real love looks like." Lila shook her head and backed toward the door. "This isn't over." No one stopped her. She pushed open the door and stormed down the hallway, her white gown flowing behind her like a collapsing curtain. Grace watched her disappear into the distance, the sound of celebration from the reception hall getting louder as she approached it. The room remained still. Caroline sat down slowly, her face pale. Robert placed a hand gently on Grace's shoulder. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Exhausted, Celeste folded the envelope with the annulment papers and put it back in her purse. As the door closed behind Lila, Grace felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, not victory, just relief. As Ellie stormed into the reception hall, eyes wild, dress trailing behind like a wounded flag. The music stopped. The real show was about to begin. She thought the wedding march would lead her to a new life. Instead, it led her to a reckoning. The ballroom was silent the moment Ellie burst through the doors. Her once perfect wedding gown now clung to her like a costume that no longer fit. The hem slightly frayed from her storming exit. Upstairs swept over the marble like the remnants of a pageant long finished. Her hair was undone, strands clinging to the sweat and tears on her cheeks. And yet what truly silenced the room wasn't her disheveled appearance. It was the fire in her eyes. People froze mid-bite, mid-toast, mid-laughter. Slowly, conversation ebbed into stunned silence. The string quartet faltered, stopping mid-measure. Everyone watched. Behind Ellie entered Ethan, calm and composed, followed by Celeste, his mother, and Grace, steady as stone. Robert and Caroline Whitmore trailed them, their faces marked by something heavier than embarrassment recognition. Ellie spun around as the doors thudded shut behind her. Her voice shattered the quiet. "You," she cried, pointing at Grace. "You've wanted this all along, haven't you?" Grace didn't flinch. Her voice came low, certain. "What I wanted was to matter. That's not the same as wanting to destroy you." Ellie turned on Ethan, her voice rising an octave. "You're leaving me. Because of some texts, I planned this wedding. I gave everything months of my life." "You didn't plan a marriage," Ethan replied evenly. "You planned control, and now you're losing it. You're weak," Ellie hissed. "You'd rather be comforted than challenged." Celeste stepped forward, her voice calm and icy enough. Ellie looked around, desperate for a supporter, an aunt, a cousin, anyone. But the stares she met weren't supportive. They were cautious, distant, pained. Grace stepped forward slowly, her words as soft as they were sharp. "I never had to take anything from you, Ellie. You handed it away. With every lie, every cruel whisper, every time you stepped on someone just to feel taller." The crowd shifted. Several guests nodded quietly. A few looked away, ashamed. They hadn't seen it before. Then Ethan walked to the podium. From the inside pocket of his suit, he drew out the annulment papers. "6 months ago, I believed in this day," he said, his voice steady. "But I can't pretend anymore. I've already signed this." He placed the envelope down, facing the room, not just Ellie. "You can't," she shouted, lunging toward it. But Grace intercepted her, not with violence, but with presence. She stood directly in her sister's path, eyes unwavering. "You've spent your life screaming to be seen," Grace said, voice low but carrying. "Now they're all watching. But not for the reasons you hoped." Ellie's mouth opened, then closed. Her face crumpled, not from shame, not yet, but from disbelief that the power she thought she held had vanished. Celeste, standing at Ethan's side, looked around the room. "Let's go, Ethan." He didn't even look back. Grace stood still, watching Ellie, the bride, without a wedding, the girl who had everything but lost it, chasing more. When Ellie finally broke, she didn't cry, she ran. She turned, lifting her skirts as she fled the room. Her heels echoed off the marble. Guests moved aside. No one stopped her, no one followed. For a long moment, the room remained quiet. The chandeliers sparkled above a stunned audience. The music did not resume. Later that night, Grace sat in her Boston apartment. No violin music, no stiff hugs, no forced family smiles. Just silent. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mother. "I know I failed you. If you can spare the time, I want to talk, just us." Grace read it twice, then placed the phone face down on the table. No response, no anger, just nothing. Because sometimes silence is no longer about pain. It's about peace. The next morning, Grace packed a small bag. She booked a cabin in Oregon, a place she had always wanted to visit, but had always postponed. Family dinners, obligations, someone else's plan. Not this time. By late afternoon, she sat alone beneath a stand of Douglas firs. The autumn light spilled through the trees in golden ribbons. In her lap, she held a small leather-bound notebook, her own, not her mother's. She began to write, not about what had happened, but about what came next. She wrote not to be remembered, but to remember herself. She smiled, because family is not who shares your name. It's who sees you when no one else does. And for the first time in her life, Grace Whitmore chose to see herself first.